Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this important webinar. Over the past week, the arts community has endured a seismic shift to the arts at the federal level. From the president submitting his preliminary budget to Congress to massive changes at the NEA. We are here today to help you understand what has happened and provide some guidance to help all of us navigate the future. My name is Jay Dick, and I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy and Partnerships here at Americans for the Arts. I will be your moderator today. I'm a middle-aged white gay cis male calling in from Fairfax, Virginia, from my home office, where I'm surrounded by memorabilia for my life. I have short brown hair, a graying beard, and am in a blue sports coat. Americans for the Arts is committed to accessibility, and this includes our speakers offering visual descriptions of themselves, which makes the webinar accessible for audience members that are blind or have low vision. Additionally, there are Zoom-generated closed captions for the audience members. You can access the closed captions by selecting the CC button for closed captions in your Zoom toolbar. The webinar also includes live American Sign Language interpretation, which you can access with the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar and select ASL interpretation. Please click interpretation in the Zoom toolbar and select American Sign Language. We welcome our ASL interpreters, Amber and Karina, with us today. Today, we will have the Q&A feature of our Zoom available for you to ask questions for our speakers throughout the webinar. Please do not put questions into the chat box as it has been disabled to allow the speakers not to be distracted, but the Q&A box is open and please use it. We will do our best to answer all the questions, either through the Q&A feature or out loud with the presentations from our speakers. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available for you to review in the next week. You will also be able to find the slides and additional resources on our website, and that link will be shared shortly here in the chat. In the likely event that we don't answer all of the questions, please reach out to Americans for the Arts Public Policy Manager Olivia Tarpley at the email address in the chat so we can keep in touch. As a reminder, again, the webinar is being recorded and will be available in the next few days. With this, I would like to introduce Aaron Harkley, Americans for the Arts CEO, who will set the stage for this important webinar. Aaron, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Jay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aaron Harkey. I'm the CEO of Americans for the Arts. I'm a Black woman with long braids. I'm wearing a blue top with light blue leaves and gold jewelry. I'm in my living room, and there are white cabinets behind me. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. I know that many of you are here today with a deep sense of concern and some with real uncertainty about what's next. As you know, last Friday, a wave of grant cancellations went out from the National Endowment for the Arts, an action that has had immediate and distressing impact on organizations and individuals across the country. These grants weren't just funding lines, they were commitments, recognitions of the critical work that you do in communities every day. This affects your budgets, your programming, your staff, and the people you serve. Since the moment these cancellations became public, Americans for the Arts has been actively gathering information, engaging with partners, and advocating for clarity, accountability, and action. Today's webinar is about sharing what we know, hearing from legal and policy experts, and most importantly, creating space for your questions, your stories, and your voices. We're here to support you, and we're here to organize. This is a difficult moment, but we are not powerless. Together, we will continue to push for the answers, the transparency, and the support that our sector deserves. My heart is with you. Back to you, Jay. Let's begin.
Thank you, Aaron. Before we start off with our panels, I want to let you know the agenda for today. We just heard from Aaron, and we will now move into an update on what exactly happened at the NEA, followed by our first panel, which will talk about the organization's ability to appeal. After that, we will hear from 3 grantees who have had their grants either terminated or rescinded. Lastly, we will discuss some advocacy options that we can all do to help correct this course of action. And then lastly, we'll have a general Q&A. We hope to deliver all of this information to you in about 75 minutes. I will note that while there will not be Q&A after each panel, the moderators will keep an eye on the Q&A box and try to answer your questions there. I want to take just a quick moment to note our speakers and allow each person to introduce themselves when they get ready to speak. Again, you have heard from Aaron Harkey, our CEO, so thank you so much, Aaron. I'm Jay. Tushar Swain is our Director of Public Policy. You'll be hearing from him a little bit. And Nina Ozlu-Tunjli is our Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund and Chief Counsel at Americans for the Arts, and she will be leading off our first panel here shortly. After that, we are going to my next panel, or my next slide here. We have Laura Zabel, who's the Executive Director of Springboard for the Arts, Manuel Cawaling, Executive Director of Inspire Washington, and Ed Zakreski, who's the Managing Director of Roadhouse Theater, will be on our second panel. And joining Nina in the first panel is Mikka G. Conway, Senior Counsel of ArtConverge. So we're very glad that we have all of them with us today. With that, I believe it's my honor to turn it over to Nina Ozlu to start our first panel. So Nina, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Or not to start our first panel, my apologies, to give us an update on what is going on at the NEA. I have way too many papers in front of me. So Nina, it's off to you.
And let me also correct that Mikka will be interviewed by Tushar, not me. Hello, everybody. During these solemn times, we want to empower you with tools to make yourselves and maybe colleagues. We have a lot of people on the call today. We have over 1,800 people registered for this, and many more will watch it after the archives. But as of today, May 7th, here's what I can report in terms of actions that have been taken. So on Friday, that was a really big day. Earlier in the day, the president released what we call his skitty budget, which is the highlights of how much money he plans on proposing for every federal large agency and even small independent agencies and programs, without details of how he proposes the money to be used. And that will come later. But in that first round, he proposed something that was not unexpected. He proposed zeroing out funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Institute of Museum Library Services, Corporation for Public Broadcasting. These are all things that he did for 4 years in a row during his first term as president. And so I was not expecting anything different. But it's always still a little bit of a gut punch to see that nothing has changed. And what I can tell you is that our congressional leaders, leading off the pack with some important Republican and Democratic leaders in both the House and Senate that specifically oversee funding for these cultural agencies, especially in the interior appropriations, with Senator Murkowski, Senator Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, Senator Collins, the full chairman, Republican of Maine, all leading with press comments saying that they completely oppose the recommendations that the president has put out, and that I am sure we are going to see different numbers. Just to recall, I know it's a different time, but in the first Trump administration, when he zeroed out funding for the cultural agencies, we were actually able to secure increases in funding during those years. But I don't necessarily expect that to happen. At least I don't expect it as a given. It's something that we have to fight for. In fact, what we're going to fight for is actually an increase. We're asking for a $2 million increase. And it is not unreasonable to request it. The chair of the Interior Subcommittee last year proposed that level of increase. We are grounded in what we're asking for. And believe me, we are going to be working the halls of Congress, and we're going to be needing all of you as grassroots advocates to be engaging your members of Congress to ask for these numbers in terms of funding. We still believe in the power of the purse lays firmly in the hands of Congress. It's probably something that the Supreme Court is going to make a decision on sometime later this year on the concept of impoundment, which is the Congress puts out a certain amount of money that they want for federal agencies, and the president chooses to withhold it and specifically reuse it for a different purpose. If the money just stays in the agency and decides to do something different with it, that is more iffy, and there are different kinds of lawsuits that are pursuing whether that is something that is going to be acceptable. And I'll just kind of go over a few of those highlights too. Many of you have been watching our breaking news timeline where we're reporting on judicial updates, congressional updates, and executive order updates. And I'm sure one of my colleagues will post that breaking news link for you. Something that's just very recent is the one for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which was subject to an executive order, along with Voice of America. And both of them have been successful currently on a temporary basis in the judicial system with securing temporary injunctive orders to prevent further cuts of staff and the issue of restoring the funds for grants. There are two IMLS lawsuits, and both look promising as it's moving through the system. It's still at the district court level, and it's still based on temporary orders that have been placed and not the review of the final judgment on those cases. You can stay abreast of what's happening in those. The NEH was not subject to an executive order, but it got hit hard by DOGE in terms of massive cuts of both funding and of staff. And they have also filed a lawsuit. There's no update yet on that. So it brings us to the most recent one, which is why you're all here, which is what's happening with the NEA. The NEA is not subject to an executive order of any kind of specific cuts. But I will tell you that DOGE representatives were evaluating, meeting with on-site at the NEA pretty much for the second half of April, less than 2 weeks, but in that period of mid to second half of April. And seeing kind of what is coming, learning from how mistakes were made at IMLS, CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Voice of America, the National Endowment for the Humanities, a slightly different take was happening, because if you can imagine, the federal courts are bombarded with lawsuits going on. So what is different with what happened here is that terrible cuts have been made, but not as dire at the moment, because things can change. So that's why I say, as of today, May 7th, this is what we know, where we know that letters of termination for existing awards, and that word is very important because it has legal rights in terms of what both a grantee can expect and what the federal agency is required to do. So awards are ones that have actually gone through the entire process of going from a recommendation from the National Council on the Arts, the NEA chair approving it, a letter of an offer going out to the prospective applicant, not prospective, to the applicant and prospective grantee, asking them to sign something. Many of you even sign these kinds of letters, but it still didn't get finalized at the NEA. And what I'm talking about are primarily grants that went through the October 2024 council meeting, letters issued around December of 2024, a press release announcing who awards offers have been sent to in January 2025. So this was the last batch of the Biden administration's grants that they wanted to put out. Of that group, these are what are called letters of offer for a grant. And as we understand it, what you should know is that we have made an emergency request through the Freedom of Information Act to get a list of all of these organizations that have received this letter in order to provide even more assistance and get a better understanding and comparing and contrasting who did and did not get these letters of what is called rescission. I believe the letter says your letter of an offer has been withdrawn. It's also known as a rescission. And in this case, the action that you can take that's articulated in the letter, and in a few minutes we'll get Mikka, who is with ArtConverge lawyer, to talk about maybe some of the other rights that you might have. But what was articulated in your letter is that you can make an appeal. The appeal has to be in writing, and there are instructions of exactly where you send it. But here is something that I want to make sure, a few things that I want to make sure you know, is that you do need to get it in by Friday, close of business on this coming Friday, May 9th. The second thing that's important is there are different kinds of appeals, but the one that they articulated in the letter is a programmatic appeal. And what that means is they are in that letter, they articulated 11 priority areas. Those priority areas stem from executive orders that were adopted that were put out by the Trump administration and signed by the president of things proactively that he's looking to have done. You have these letters. There are things related to supporting HBCUs, America 250, fostering AI competency, assisting disaster relief. I'm not going to go through all of them, supporting military and veterans, tribal communities. The list goes on. The key here is if you think that you can make a case that the project that you had originally proposed is connected to one of those things, you should make that case. And Mikka will go through the elements of what you need to be sure to include in an appeal letter. But you want to focus on those new priorities of the administration based on executive orders that have been put out. That is your best bet for a programmatic appeal. And you need to do it on time, and it's really important to do. If you are in the group that received termination letters because you already have a full legal award from the NEA, there are two types. One where your performance period has already concluded, but you still have money to collect, or you haven't completed all of the elements for closing out your account, your grant. For that one, you have until May 31st. Now, for those who have a cutoff performance period, perhaps you were originally awarded something that took you through December of this year, perhaps October or September of this year, sometime in the future. You're all of a sudden now going until May 31st. And what that means is you have until the end of this month to incur new costs. It's not based on just submitting receipts of things that happened before May 2nd when you received the letter. The date of the letter is not significant. The date of the termination is significant, and that's May 31st. There are a lot of things that you can still include in your May 31st. For instance, you may have an event taking place in July. You can get that invoice in, but here's the key that I really want to recommend, and that is that you pay for it as well. Not just take the invoice and submit it as a receipt. The receipt has to be paid for. So please do that by May 31st. The other deadline that follows is just getting your paperwork up, which is June 30th. That's your final payment request. Do it early. These kind of federal portals get clogged up and break down if too many people are doing it at the same time. I would just recommend trying to do it as early as possible. And then finally, July 31st is when you need to submit your final financial reports. The letter says that the NEA is waiving its descriptive report in geolocators. But if you think that you might have a bigger appeal later on, it's recommended that even though they said it's waived, you still do it if you have the time, if you have the ability to get that done, just so that you have a fully completed grant closeout. And with that, I can see Jay is showing me my time is up, or do you want to ask me?
I'm going to ask a quick question. We have like 3 questions. I think they're quick answers. The deadlines to appeal. End of day, what does that mean? 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock?
Yeah. It does mean close of business. Now, the NEA is on the East Coast. So I have been told, but something verbal is not as strong as something written, is it? So they don't specify the time in the termination letter. So I believe, and I'd like Mikka to confirm this when she comes on next, that it could go up to midnight Eastern time.
Okay. Perfect. One more question, but I think also the answer is just do it early. Don't wait to the deadline.
Yeah.
Can you repeat
Remember,
real
these
briefly?
portals get clogged up. Do not wait until the end. Yeah, go ahead.
And real quickly, can you repeat the difference between the May 9th and May 31st cutoff?
Yeah, May 9th is to make an appeal, and that applies to both terminations of awards and rescission withdrawals of offers of letters. You both have the ability to appeal, but you have to do it by this Friday, and it needs to be connected to one of the new priorities that's listed in your letter. May 31st only applies to those that got an early termination award, not a rescission withdrawal of an offer. And that is a shortened performance period to get your expenses approved. And I'm just going to add one more thing in the appeal where I say you could appeal to the new priorities. You cannot, what is called de-scope your project description, meaning you can't propose doing something different so it fits one of those new priorities. You need to show how the existing project proposal that you were requesting fits with one of those priorities. We're
Perfect.
all in the arts. Be imaginative.
Yeah. Nina, thank you so much for this informative session. There's 70+ questions in the Q&A box that I think a lot of them have your name written on them. So I'm going to let you go crazy on that. And with that, I will be happy to bring Tushar back to the screen to start off our second panel, or our first panel. So Tushar.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Tushar Swain. I'm Director of Public Policy at Americans for the Arts. So good to see all of you today. I am a middle-aged, brown-skinned male with a bald head, and today I am wearing a purple striped shirt, a blue sports jacket, and a white wall with some art behind me. And it is my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Mikka Conway. Mikka is Senior Counsel at ArtConverge, bringing over 3 decades of experience in curatorial, administrative, legal, and senior leadership roles at arts organizations, ranging from small artist foundation to a large private collection to college museums and major art museums in California, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Mexico, and Washington, D.C. Mikka has taught intellectual property law and is one of the first members of the advisory board of the Open Copyright Education Advisory Network. She's a frequent speaker on topics relating to museums, law, and inclusion. Mikka holds degrees in art history from the University are from Stanford University and Williams College, and a JD summa cum laude from the University of Minnesota Law School. Following law school, she clerked for the Honorable David M. Ebel on the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit and worked in Washington, D.C. as an associate in a tax group of a major law firm. And she is licensed and active in California and New York. Mikka, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, would you mind giving us a physical description of yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tushar. So my name is Mikka G. Conway. I use she, her pronouns. I am a middle-aged Asian American woman with medium skin tone and shoulder-length black hair. I've got round frameless glasses on and a gray collared shirt. And I am in a nondescript hotel room, so my background is blurred. You're not missing much if you can't see it. So that's me. And let me also just say too, anything I contribute to this webinar is for informational purposes only. I am a lawyer, but this is should not be considered legal advice or a substitute for the sort of particularized advice of your own counsel, who will be familiar with your specific facts and circumstances. And just as a sort of spoiler alert for what a lot of what I'm going to say is that it's very dependent on your facts and circumstances.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Mikka. We're so happy to have you. Let's just start out with some of the basics. The NEA award termination notifications, they use sections of the federal statute as well as the NEA's authorizing statute as grounds for termination. Can you just explain this a little bit in layman's terms? And maybe just some insight on how these are being used in this administration relevant to past administrations?
Sure, I'll do my best. So 200-340 is reference to a federal regulation, not actually a statute. It's a reference to Part 200 of Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations. And this title is issued by the Office of Management and Budget, which is within the Executive Office of the President. And Part 200 is really setting forth government-wide guidance for the administration of federal grants, basically. And sometimes you might hear it just called Part 200 or uniform guidance or the uniform requirements. And the NEA authorizing legislation, Nina would know much more about or be able to speak much more comprehensively about it, but it's basically that is the congressional action that created the NEA and that specifies that the NEA will have a chairperson and maybe most importantly delegates to that chairperson the authority to carry out a program of grant making. And it does, as relevant to our conversation today, require the agency to give notice and an opportunity to be heard but only in cases where the reason for the grant termination is that the grantee is non-compliant, is materially has materially failed to comply with terms and conditions. It does not appear to cover this kind of termination reason, which is that the agency's changed its priorities. And then as for the way that this administration versus others have used this, that is, again, is also not something that I'm well able to speak to, but Nina, maybe with her, longer experience with this and her comments about what happened in the last Trump administration and maybe how it was different in Biden administration might be able to speak a little more fulsomely to that. But the general idea that the agency can terminate a grant for specific stated reasons is long-standing in the uniform guidance.
Thanks, Mikka. You and I talked a little bit beforehand just on the appeals process and appeals language, making some comparisons with the NEA to the NEH and IMLS. Can you speak a little bit to that? And then we also have a couple of questions just in the chat that I'm seeing about the 7-day appeal process for terminated grants as well as rescinded offers if this is usual. Some are talking about it typical 30 days. So just your thoughts on that.
Sure. So let's see if I can, the general framework is the uniform guidance is out there, and that is applicable across the, sort of the general default rules. However, individual agencies then are able to have their own rules. What most of them do, though, is they just wholesale adopt Part 200. And that is, in fact, what NEA has done. There's a federal regulation that states specifically that the NEA, adopts Part 200. The uniform guidance, sets out the basic rules for pre-award and post-award administration of the grant. And in the post-award administration of the grant, that's where it sets forth these specified reasons, various reasons that the agency can terminate, and requires that the agency, in making the award, has to explicitly include these termination provisions in order for them to be active. But like I said, the fact that the NEA has adopted by reference Part 200, and then they've put it on their website, the NEA website, depending on when your grant was awarded, there's different versions of the terms and conditions on their website. I think right now they're up to 3 versions. There's one version for grants in this fiscal year, the ones that have been awarded since October 1st. There's one for the grants for the previous 5-year chunk, like 2020 to 2024. And then there's a set of general terms and conditions for grants from FY15 to FY20. I think that's right. But if you look at them all, as regards this, the termination provisions, they're all the same. And they say basically, the uniform regs only contemplate any kind of notice or opportunity to be heard when the reason for the grant is that there's been a finding of non-compliance. So it's really silent on whether there's any kind of appeal or notice or opportunity to be heard when the reason is that the agency has just determined that it's got different priorities, or that this grant is not effectuating those priorities. And so, but that being said, NEH and IMLS, in adopting, even though they have adopted the uniform guidance, they have also taken time to specify, to detail out an appeals process for grant terminations, for all grant terminations. And so that's one really big difference. And I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, but it doesn't appear to me that the NEA has detailed, certainly not in its general terms and conditions, and nowhere else that I could find on their website, do they spell out the appeals process, even though the uniform guidance says that agencies have to maintain written procedures for terminations. But again, they only seem to be talking about those terminations that are for cause or for non-compliance. So that's there. Unfortunately, it's just the NEA in particular is not very clear about how to file an appeal.
Understood. Thank you. So what does a good appeals letter look like? Can you just go through the different buckets, for example, that Nina talked about, and then just some different strategies for your appeal letter?
Right. Well, I think I believe you've distributed or linked to the great template that the American Film Alliance provided, and that's a great start. I mean, again, because of the lack of specificity about how appeals should be filed, I mean, the most information that we have is the letter itself, and it just basically says send an email explaining, make your case. I mean, I think if you look by reference to, say, the NEH's general terms and conditions and the appeal process spelled out in there, again, it's not too much more specific, but for example, it says that the grantee awardee should submit, quote, a full statement of the recipient's position and the pertinent facts and reasons that support such a position. So I think to do the best that you can in the time that you have, using the Film Alliance letter as a template to set forth, if you're making the case that you believe you can get your original project as awarded into one of those categories in the termination letter. For example, one of them is about supporting veterans, and if you know that you've got veterans in your audience base, if you have evidence of that, or if you can cite to any information supporting that, that's a hook. Make America healthy again. There's lots of research out there on how the arts improve well-being. These are sort of tenuous, but they're not. They're colorable arguments. So like Nina said, you're creative, your grant best, your audience best, look at those categories in your termination letter with a sort of think about it, construe it very broadly, and see, make your best argument, do the best you can in the time that you've got.
And if you aren't appealing for reconsideration based on alignment with the new priorities, what are you appealing? Is that concerns against the termination process? And then what does a letter like that look like?
Again, I think that there's some language in that template letter, and then it's hard to keep up with all this litigation, but looking at, for example, at the NEH related lawsuit, which I think is the one that's most analogous to this situation, because it's one where they're specifically challenging, in addition to the sort of institution level things that are happening at the NEH, they're also challenging the individual grant terminations. As basically, in very broad terms, just contrary to federal law. And I think in the amount of time that you have, and without counsel, it may be difficult to make, and unnecessary at this point, to make a very specific legal argument, drawing. But you could look at the NEA complaint. You could draw, see how it applies to your case. What are the arguments that they're making? But I think, respectfully raising a concern that the termination may be contrary to federal law would probably, be sufficient to say that you have a problem with the process. Because, and I can't speak to any litigation that may be coming down the pike out of this, but that would all get fleshed out in that litigation. That doesn't have to happen by May 9th. By May 9th, you just need to get, if you want to appeal, you just need to get your letter in. And to Nina's point about the deadline being midnight, again, they don't say. Some people might say it's better to do it by, or if you're going to say that by midnight, do it by midnight Eastern time. So even if you're in a time zone, if you're in California, like I'm in California right now, don't wait till 10 p.m. Pacific. But even leaving aside whether midnight Eastern is the correct deadline, the advice is to get it in as early as possible, because, as Nina said, and as I know from personal experience, these federal systems break, because you shouldn't just be sending the email. You also want to get your appeal into the eGMS system, so that it goes into your sort of official award record, becomes part of that record, and that will help you with proof of filing.
Great. I'm just looking here at some questions. Nina actually touched about this, but would love for your thoughts as well. That awardees can incur new costs until May 31st, 2025, related to their award. It doesn't appear clear by the letter that that an awardee also needs to pay the incurred costs. Do you have any thoughts or advice on that?
I think I would just second everything that Nina said. Again, it isn't clear. It certainly, the letter by its terms suggests that, you know, the project is approved and has the NEA support through May 31st, that expenses can be incurred. But in the definition of incurred, you know, maybe they may interpret it as actually out of pocket. So I would second that advice to draw down and actually spend those funds as soon as possible.
What about here? We have one question, whether an organization should make an appeal if most of the money has been drawn down, or if this, you know, doesn't impede the close of their contract by that much, like a few weeks or maybe even a month. Is there a reason to appeal in that case?
Sure. I mean, I think that would be a non-legal decision about, you know, then it would become a question of like the sort of symbolic value of doing that and in expressing solidarity with the field. But, you know, that's going to take time and resources. And so, you know, organizations will have to determine for themselves whether that's worth it. And I do see Jay giving us kind of the high sign. So I just want to be mindful of that.
He is, and he does this to me all the time.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
gonna ask one more question, and then we will bring you back at the end. Nina touched on this too, but would love your insight on it. That you know, awardees have to submit federal financial reports by July 31st. In the letter, I think that the NEA officially waived the requirement to submit their final descriptive report and geographic location of project activity report. Is that something that you would waive or not do? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I would second what Nina said. I mean, I think it's a good idea, no matter what, to do the final descriptive report, because that's sort of the plain English, you know, description of the impact that you had, and that will come in handy, you know, in the future, no matter what, and be useful to the field. And similarly, the geographic report, that's important data. And I, you know, personally, I have a lot of concerns around the way that the administration has maybe ceased collecting or ceased making available data that, you know, we have sort of taken for granted in informing a lot of the decisions that we make. So those things, if they're not a huge burden, I would recommend doing them. And then, as we were discussing, Tushar, you know, if all of these changes are successfully challenged and we revert back to the pre-existing rules, you will want to have those reports filed, and just to protect yourself against any suggestion that you weren't in compliance, even though they've said that those are waived.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mikka. We're going to bring you back on at the end for a final round of questions with everyone. We have some questions on lawsuits, comparing this to what's happening at the NEH and IMLS. So hopefully we can get to those as well. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jay.
Thank you, Tushar, and thank you to everyone who's submitting questions right now. We're well over 200 questions. We've tried to answer some of them, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. I'd like to invite our panelists for our next group here. So these are individuals who've had their grants either terminated or rescinded. Just a little bit of time to tell you, kind of introduce them to you, find out what they're doing, what is going on, and what steps maybe they are taking. So we have, again, Manuel Cawaling with Inspire Washington, Laura Zabel with Springboards for the Arts, and Ed Zakreski from Roundhouse Theater here in Bethesda, Maryland. So real quickly, let's just start off. I see Ed at my top left, so I'm just going to ask you, Ed, please introduce yourself briefly and tell us a little bit about your organization. Then I'm going to go to round robin for that.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Ed Zakreski. I'm the managing director of Roundhouse Theater in Bethesda, Maryland, just 2 metro stops outside of Washington, D.C. I am a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and beard, although trending much more towards salt where the hair remains. I am wearing bright red glasses and a red and blue checked shirt and blue sport coat, and I'm sitting in my home office. And Roundhouse Theater, our mission is to be a theater for everyone. We take our role of being a theater in the nation's capital region very seriously. We do a lot of plays about politics, but not really plays about politics, more about people affected by politics. So we just did What the Constitution Means to Me. I will talk shortly about our production of Bad Books that just closed, what we were supposed to get NEA support, and this summer we will be presenting the Matthew Lopez's two-part gay epic, The Inheritance.
Perfect. Thank
Just
you,
an
Ed.
example of the work that we do.
Perfect. And it's a wonderful little theater up there. Manny, why don't you go next, sir?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manny Cawaling. I'm the Executive Director for Inspire Washington. We are the cultural advocacy organization for the state of Washington, lifting up the wonderful programs in science, heritage, and arts all across our state. Visual description about myself. I am a middle-aged Asian American male, Filipino American. I have short, dark hair. I have dark glasses. I have facial hair, a goatee, and a mustache. And I'm wearing a dark blue shirt with specks of white and red.
Laura.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be with you all today, and thanks for organizing this so quickly and for lifting up examples from work that's happening on the ground. My name is Laura Zabel. I'm the Executive Director of Springboard for the Arts. I am a middle-aged white woman with blonde hair. I am wearing a gray shirt, and I am sitting in a little phone booth in our redeveloped used car dealership that is our community space in St. Paul, and have the Springboard logo behind my head. Springboard is a community development and economic justice organization that's run by and for artists. We're based in Minnesota, both in the urban neighborhood of Rondo in St. Paul and in a rural community called Fergus Falls, which is in west central Minnesota. In addition to our direct work in Minnesota, we also steward a national network called the Creative Change Coalition that is a coalition of place-based, locally rooted arts and community organizations.
Laura, we'll stick with you. As you can see in the Q&A box, lots of questions about appeals, lots of questions on what to do. And of course, that is what is on everyone's mind. So we certainly understand that. So Laura, tell me a little bit about your grant and what happened up there in Springboard.
Yeah, so Friday evening, we received 2 termination notices for 2 open grants, the only 2 open grants we have with the NEA right now. One of them, like many people in the Q&A, I noticed one of them is completely closed out already and is a completed project in our rural location. The other is a brand new project for us that was approved and contracted under a special invitation project responding to the former Surgeon General's epidemic of loneliness work. So it is a project in both urban and rural Minnesota addressing social isolation and supporting mental health with a series of 4 really awesome social service and community safety net organizations, 2 in each location. Different than some of the other grants that were approved but not completely contracted at the end of last year, this was actually brought all the way through to contract, and we had been able to draw down a small amount of kind of planning funds on the front end. It's a $150,000 grant, so is financially a really big deal for us, but also work that we are committed to doing regardless. It's really important work that the world and our communities need and want right now, so we're committed to continuing that. We have already filed an appeal, both on the grounds that this project fits under the kind of broad definition of health priority, and also because it is our understanding that this set of projects were supported with gift funds, which is not public dollars, but were funds that were gifted to the NEA from a private philanthropy, which also I think has some additional layers of like donor intent about that money. I'm not optimistic that that appeal is going to do anything, but it felt important to lodge that appeal and express our need for these resources. So that's where we are in terms of the specific NEA process right now. We will definitely do this work anyway and are looking for other ways to support it.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura. So again, this is a termination letter. You had a signed contract for both of these grants. And Manny, I think you had the same deal. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your your issue or your project?
Sure. Inspire Washington is a cultural advocacy organization. Squarely within our mission is developing new resources and creating greater access. And within that big, broad body of work, of course, students in public schools, their access to quality arts education is really important to us. But in the state of Washington, we have a very big state. There are over 281 cities and towns and 295 school districts. We know that not every student has equitable access to arts education. It really matters where you live, the identity of your family, your socioeconomic status. Many, many factors play into your ability to access music and visual arts. This matter really matters to us, not only because we know that it spurs academic success, but we also, in the state of Washington, we had a clarifying law passed several years ago that clarified that arts education is basic education and therefore is mandated in our Constitution to be provided to every student. So wrestling with all of that and really seeking to advocate for our students, we created the Arts for All Coalition, focused on equitable access to arts education. In our coalition, we have a lot of education partners. We do this in partnership with our state arts agency and Arts Ed Washington, our arts education advocacy organization, and a longer list of education leaders. Within the program, we measure data. We also do a lot of communications work, and we're developing strategies to provide more arts education to students. We received a $75,000 grant from National Endowment for the Arts. We applied for that grant last February of 2024. We received an award notice in the early or mid-fall. We signed the contract shortly thereafter, and we started in January. We did receive a termination letter, and right now our program does carry us through toward the third, kind of the end of third quarter of this year. So although we've done a number of activities already, we can't do all the activities. One of the big activities that we're really bound by the calendar is convening education leaders from across the state. Well, of course, those education leaders are in school, so we can't do that until July. So we're kind of still wrestling with it programmatically to see if there's any way that we can still gather and convene. But of course, the original plan was gathering leaders from all across the state in the middle of the state for an in-person convening.
Perfect, Manny, thank you. And I'm going to come back to you after Ed to talk a little bit about your appeal around the education component of that. Ed, tell me a little bit about yours.
So we just closed on Sunday a world premiere production of a play called Bad Books by Sharon Rothstein. It's a play that we helped develop. We did it as a part of our Bonnie Hammerschlag National Capital Do Play Festival readings 2 years ago. And it went over so well that we brought back the entire team, director and actors, to do the world premiere. We submitted, like many other people last summer, got our notification of recommendation in November. It was announced by the NEA in January, never converted to an actual award. And despite some regular communicating with the NEA staff, we're not able to get any progress. On January 29th, when the first funding freeze was announced, our grant disappeared from the EGMS Reach portal. And then we heard nothing official until we got our notification of withdrawal on Friday night. The real irony here is that the play Bad Books, the playwright makes an amazing and successful effort to really humanize both sides of the debate about parental rights and censorship. And it acknowledges that it's a complex issue that is not one-sided. And that doesn't seem to be what this administration wants to be funding right now. But we are going to go ahead and submit an appeal. We think we will say that we fall under the 250th anniversary celebration because this is a show that talks about First Amendment rights very clearly. I don't really have any hope, but I think it's important for all of us to make a stand, and this is maybe the first baby step in doing so.
So it was a $20,000 grant, I believe you had. And again, the irony here is the the show closed on May 4th, and on May 2nd, I think you got your letter, right? So
Yes, and it's a 90-minute play, so we had already finished that night's performance when the grant was canceled. So there were only 3 performances left.
yep. Laura said you've already submitted your appeal for this. Tell me exactly, what you did to make this appeal. What were the steps you did?
I just followed the directions in the email to send an email to the address that's in the termination email. Honestly, I didn't spend a lot of time on it. It feels like an important but probably symbolic gesture. So, I got
So yeah, so we're not talking going to the portals or anything like that. It is an email that you sent back to get on record of an appeal for this. Did you try to connect it to any topics that are part of the priorities of the administration?
Yeah, one of the priority topics in the list is about health, and so this whole program is about health. I also noticed in the Q&A there's a question from another grantee in this same program whose grant was not canceled, and I don't have any insight into whether there will be more terminations, but I have heard from staff at the NEA that they don't know why some of the grants in this pool were terminated and others weren't. So I think there's confusion.
Confusion, maybe even a little hope. Who knows? Manny,
Jay, this is Nina. I
yes.
can just jump on that one. The NEA took a look at those grants to see if it was obvious that any of them connected to those 11 priority areas. And if they did, they didn't send them termination letters or rescission letters.
So they might have missed it. And so that's why an appeal is important.
That's right.
Like, no,
That's right.
you didn't see this, type of
Yes.
thing. Yep. Manny, you have not appealed yet. Are you going to appeal?
No, we haven't appealed yet. One thing I should have mentioned that our arts and education grant was with the collective impact category. We haven't appealed yet. We're working on that this week. It's been a busy time for us. We're in our state tour, so we're not actually at our our offices right now. For the grounds for our appeal, under that long list of priorities, foster skilled trade jobs. Of course, this is arts and education. Support tribal communities. The state of Washington has 42 tribes, 29 of which are federally recognized. A focus, of course, of the program is their equitable access to arts education. Health too, we hear all the time, of course, from our school district partners that arts and education is a vital tool in the students' mental health and well-being. And also, all throughout rural Washington, we have had disasters, wildfires, that we have communities that have received FEMA and disaster relief. And those are communities in recovery, and providing them with arts education and quality arts instruction as a healthy expression of their feelings has been very critical and vital to them. So those are all of the things that we're doing right now. We've also been talking to our congressional partners. Washington State is represented by 12 members of Congress. And they are telling us, of course, to go through with the appeal. We've also heard from our district offices that we should initiate a congressional inquiry, as that is the highest level of escalation, and also has a formalized process for addressing them. So we're working on that. In addition to our application as a state's cultural advocacy organization, all of those grants could amount to $2+ million for cultural and creative arts organizations statewide. So, of course, we have a role outside of being a grantee and supporting them.
Perfect. Thank you, Manny. Ed, you've already said you're going, the First Amendment, America 250. Have you appealed yet? What are you doing?
We are going to get an appeal in by Friday. And we are going to try and say that we fit into the priorities. The other thing I want to add, just as advice, and I know we're all in this, in the middle of it, trying to figure out next steps on the official side, but there's a great saying that has been attributed to everybody from Machiavelli to Churchill to Rahm Emanuel of never let a good crisis go to waste. We got a fundraising appeal out to our supporters on Monday. And I am thrilled to say that our amazing audience has already responded with more money than what we had taken away from the grant.
That's always a nice little thing to have there with that. we're running out of time here. So Laura, we just heard Ed's advice. What do you have any advice for folks?
If I have advice, I think it's this. First of all, I want to say to folks on this call that I see you and the work that you are doing, and local work pretty much is the only work that matters right now. Like how we build relationships with one another, how we get off the internet and into our communities and build the networks and the relationships and the social connections that will sustain us if we need mutual aid, if we need to respond to crises. That's the role that art and artists and creativity can play right now, and it's really, really urgent. And I also want to say that like this is one crisis among many crises that predate this administration this time or the other time. Many people on this call know things were not great in our communities before. Our communities had a lot of urgent needs before, and local organizations are the ones that are responding to those needs on a daily basis. And so I don't know if it's advice or just a call to action, that's the story to tell right now. Every reporter in your town wants to tell a story about NEA cuts and the drama of the NEA. But that's just one story alongside all of these other federal agencies that have been cut. And so if you can use that attention to tell the story of what you're actually doing, the value you provide, its impact on your community, on social connection, on your local economy, that's, I feel like, our path out of this. That and solidarity across other sectors. We have got to get out of talking only with other arts organizations. This isn't just our crisis, it's everyone's. And so find those connections with other organizations, with other people, with other movements in your community, and build solidarity and power with them. So artists and culture are standing alongside all of the other things that communities need to be healthy. I find a lot of solace and hope in doing that work locally in a way that is really hard to feel when we're only focused on the federal system level. So yeah, I guess my advice is keep doing the amazing work you're doing and make sure you're telling people about it.
Wonderful, Laura. Manny.
Also, the Creative Change Coalition is hosting a session next week to talk about local action and local response, and I'll try and share a link to that too.
Perfect. And you have the wonderful Betty McCollum in your district at the federal level too. Manny, any other advice?
Sure. I agree with that. Lean into community. First of all, we're not just leaders, we're people, right? This is really disappointing, right? So we have to keep up our spirits. And also for many, sometimes it's easy to feel super isolated. So many people share the same story, and these are great people to collaborate with. Share your story, write an op-ed, get us, reach out to your newspaper, to any form of media, articulate the impact. Right. It's easy for us as the arts and cultural sector to kind of keep focused, to put a positive glow on the story. But the reality is the loss of federal funding creates gaps and loss, and the community will not have those services sometimes. And that's something that we have to speak towards to make sure that people understand that federal investment is super important. Reach out to your members of Congress. And also become a stronger advocate. Find your state, whoever's doing advocacy in your community, your state arts advocacy organization, partner with them, do those action alerts. Let's be loud and fight for these programs.
Perfect. Ed, one last chance for you. Any other thoughts?
Yes. As somebody who's worked in the arts in the DC area for 30 years, I know a bunch of folks who work at the NEA. And I just want to say, whether they're your program officers or in the grants office, these are people who are on our side, and they are working under extremely challenging conditions and trying to do everything that they can for us and our field. So please show them patience, show them love. These are people who truly believe and love in all of our art forms.
Wonderful last comments there. I hope my panelists have seen all the hearts and thumbs ups and everything that have been constantly through this panel. So thank you, Manny, Laura, Ed, for sharing your stories with us. There are 300 plus emails. Please go try to answer some of those if you have the opportunity. All those emails, all those questions are going to be saved. We are going to be responding to them. So, but we're obviously not going to get to them. So thank you everyone for this panel, and we will move on to our next little session before we go into some general Q&A. So I'll invite Tushar to come back in to talk a little bit about some of the questions that we have been seeing about why are we, messing with Congress? Why is Congress still relevant? Is this what we should be doing? Why, should we be relying upon Republicans in Congress? Lots of different things there. So Tushar, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sure. And thank you, Jay. We are continuing to advocate for $209 million, which is a $2 million, a modest $2 million increase from FY25. And that was actually the number that was listed in last year's Senate bill. So we think that it's an appropriate ask. And when President Trump eliminated the NEA and NEH in his budgets in 2016 and 2020, it was bipartisan support from Congress that ultimately denied those requests. And we certainly understand that a second Trump administration is not parallel to a first Trump administration. Most importantly and notably, there was no Doge. But we still do have friends in Congress. This is a bipartisan effort. For example, a Dear Colleague letter on the House side is actually being sent by 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, the 2 Republicans being Congressman Mike Turner, as well as Maria Salazar, advocating for $209 million on the House side. And, this is a really important time. Jay's going to talk a little bit about how you can take some action using some of AFTA's tools, but this is a very important time. We're going to programmatic requests are due to the Appropriations Committee next week. So members of Congress will submit their requests to appropriators. From there will be a markup, which we will find out what that number is on the House side for the NEA, for the NEH, for IMLS. And then, from there will be committee votes, there will be House votes, potentially on the floor. So now is the time to advocate, particularly before the August recess.
One thing I will note that's also going on is, as Tushar mentioned, this happened in Trump 1, where he zeroed out funding for the NEA and NEH, and Congress put the money back in. There's 2 tracks going on right now. There's executive orders, which is around the presidency, which that's going to be a lot of court cases. That's going to be a lot of actions around that. And then there's also Congress that's still there and still valid. We have to continue working with Congress for the next budget cycle is going on right now, as Tushar mentioned. We have to continue that, because if we allow them to zero out funding for the NEA and we don't fight in the Congress for it, the NEA does truly go away at that point. Congress has to reauthorize money for next fiscal year for Congress. And we're very confident that they're going to do that, because as Tushar was saying, we have really wonderful bipartisan leadership support for the NEA, NEH, IMLS. But if we don't continue to fight with that, for that in Congress, then we're going to lose the long-term war. And so I know a lot of people are asking us, why are we still working with Congress? Because we have to. That is what we have to do to be part of that. We're also working with executive orders. You've seen lawsuits already filed on on NEH and IMLS. I had my crystal ball out. I'd probably say there's going to be some, on the NEA's actions. It's a little too soon, legal speaking wise, but that's why we're doing what we're doing. I've been in this town for 20 some years. Tushar's been here a long time too. It's all about working with the system to be able to shape where the system is going. Now, there's things that you can do to shape where the system is going to, and I know Manny and some other folks have talked about it, so I'm going to ask for the next slide to be brought up. Little things that you could be doing to help with what is going on in addition to doing what you do locally there. There's going to be a whole bunch of links that are going to be dropped into the chat right now. But as Manny said, let your elected official know what's going on at the federal level, especially. We have sample emails for you to send. We have sample phone scripts that you can call your members, and the system will identify the phone number for you. Please do that. Please send this to your audiences, your groups out there, so that they're hearing from that they're doing this. If we can get, last time this happened, we had like 80,000 emails sent to Congress. That matters. People pay attention to that. So it's really important to do that. Don't get into the mindset that we're helpless. We are not helpless. That is out there. Additionally, if you do have a grant that's been rescinded, contact your member of Congress. Ask them to try to intervene on your behalf. That's certainly another thing to be doing there. We ask you, if you haven't already, we have a national pulse survey that's in the field right now. That is basically, have you suffered from this? Have you had financial problems from all this? We want to know this. We need to get good information. So we're not just, oh, the arts are being harmed. Here's how they're being harmed, specific dollar amounts in specific areas on specific categories. So please do that. We also have an area for you to share your story. Again, at Americans for the Arts, we have a rule: no data without a story, nor story without a data. So please share your stories with us so we can use them, so we can reach back out to you and say, can we have you, on another future webinar? Or can we use your story in a publication that we're doing? Share your stories. We're in this together. And again, connect with your local and state arts organizations. Manny mentioned this too. Most every state has a statewide arts advocacy organization that's out there. Please, please go to them, become a member of them. They're doing this at the state level too. It's important that we're all doing this together. And a lot of your local arts agencies have advocacy efforts in there too. So please support your local advocates, your state advocates, and of course what we're doing at the federal one. And then of course we have a social media toolkit that's available. Please use that. Please, flood Facebook, Instagram, and what all the rest of the young kids are using nowadays that I don't know about. Flood all of them and let people know that, hey, the arts really do matter. You see a web link there, americansforthearts.org/advocate/protect the NEA. Please go there. There's a lot of great resources for that. That is there too. So there's lots of things we're doing. There's going to be more coming from this. This is not everything, and also this is what we're doing. We're trying every day to help you with that. So lots of things. We're in this together, as Laura said. Please, let's all work together and let more people than it's on the webinar now know about this. With that over, I'm going to bring back all of our guests, our guest speakers. I know they've been busy answering questions online, and we are, again, over 300 questions that are being answered here. So I've not been following a lot of the questions we were recently. So Nina, I'm going to start out with you, and I see you just unmuted too. So perfect timing. We've been working together a long time. What in the question Q&A box have you seen that's been really coming up that you want to try to address?
Yes, a couple of things. One, and I have been trying to answer them as fast as my fingers can type. There is some confusion about folks who have drawn down all of their money and thinking that they might have to now return it because their project is in the future. And the answer to that is no, absolutely. You do not have to return your money, but you do need to complete the closeout paperwork, the final financial paperwork, especially. It doesn't sound like you have to still submit a final payment request because you've already drawn down your money. There are questions about showing that you've made the match, so that if your project was $70,000 and you were getting $35,000 from the NEA, you need to show receipts to collect that $35,000, but you do need to show that you made your match as well. So you're not subject to getting any money clawed back because you didn't make the match. That is one of the absolute requirements. People feeling like maybe they shouldn't do the appeal because they're not sure if they'll match up to those new priorities. I think that you should absolutely try. There are lots of creative ways to meet these new priorities. And I think you should think about it overnight. And I think something's going to come to you in the morning that's going to be truly creative. And for Manny specifically, your project is about arts education. In addition to making the connection to the new priorities, the other connection that you should make is, in addition to these new priorities that the letter refers you to as making a connection to, there are 3 other statutory priorities that the NEA needs to make a connection to. One of them doesn't apply to you. It's the public partnerships with state arts agencies, local arts agencies, regional arts agencies. Those funding items are still going through. On May 1st, the council just approved them. Your state arts agencies are still going to get their money. Many local and the regionals and many local arts agencies, as long as there wasn't a direct connection to say, you're going to use the money to hire a DEI officer. An example like that wouldn't work. But for the most part, locals are getting. So that's the first statutory bucket. The second one that does apply to you is arts education. Because in the, and Mikka referred to this under the federal statute of the NEA in its last reauthorization, any money that they get, and I believe the number is 180 million, and they're currently at 207 million. So any money above 180 million is supposed to be used for arts education. So in addition, don't give up making a connection to the new priorities, but add to that you understand that one of the federal statutory requirements of the NEA is also to use funds for arts education. The third bucket is research. I wouldn't rely only on those statutory requirements because the letter refers specifically to the new priorities, but I think you have a role to be able to get into both, but don't just use the federal statutory.
Excellent advice, Tina. Hey, we have a question about the reach portals being closed and what to be doing. So I see, Mikka, you're nodding your head, so I'll turn to you first. And if you have any thoughts.
Sure. So I am, this is, news to me too, that and it looks like it's only affecting people who've received offers that have been withdrawn. It's not affecting people who are post-award, who are actually in the grant. If that's not true, then please let me know. But I'm not familiar with Reach. I have not used the Reach portal. But one commenter did say that they thought there was a way to send a message, just sort of a generic message, and to do that with reference to your offer number, something that they can tie it back. So if you can do that, do that. But if you can't, don't just send the email. Do what the letter says. Send the email. And if you can't do it in eGMS because they've eliminated your file, then you can't. You might note in your appeal, I would be filing this in eGMS, but my file appears to have disappeared from the site.
And as a reminder, the email to send it to is grants, plural S, grants at arts, plural, arts.gov. So grants@arts.gov is where you send it. That can't close down. You can always send it there. That's the correct email address. I suspect that that portal is closed because your offer for an award never became an award. So I know there was a question of someone saying, well, I've already spent some money on what I wanted to get the grant for. Can I just submit those receipts? And the answer is no, because your letter of an offer never materialized into an actual award. So there's nothing that you can submit other than your appeal. And I do recommend you do that.
We had some questions about lawsuits. And I know it's real early in the process right now. You have to have people have standing. But Mikka or Nina especially are two lawyers of the group. What is your crystal ball saying about lawsuits? Especially, is there anything that we can learn from the NEH or IMLS lawsuits to help inform us what may happen going forward?
Mikka, you first.
I'm not a litigator. I'm not, you know, we haven't seen any quote, no court has taken any action yet on the NEH lawsuit, which is the most recently filed and the one that's arguably the most, you know, analogous to the situation here of like a hypothetical challenge to the cancellation of individual grants. I just, my crystal ball is so broken. My crystal ball has been broken for years. So you know, just looking at the differences though, like that I mentioned, like just procedurally, the NEH is a different animal than the NEA, because they do detail their appeal process and appear to have that appeal process available to for any kind of grant termination, not just a grant termination for material failure to comply with the terms and conditions. That said, there's a lot of, you know, a lot of the sort of basic Administrative Procedure Act arguments about these actions being arbitrary and capricious or contrary to law or beyond the scope of the authority that the NEA chairperson has or that DOJ has. That's another grounds for challenge in the NEH lawsuit. They're, you know, claiming that DOJ itself is unlawful. And, you know, so a lot of those, I would think a lot of those arguments could be made applicable here, but it won't be, the NEH lawsuit is not exactly on point. None of the current litigation is exactly on point. Or just the facts are different, you know, with the NEA.
Nina, anything else?
Well, I would agree with everything that Mikka said, and I would add a couple of things. One is there are two kinds of lawsuits. One is your personal grant. If you feel that there's other kinds of injustice here, and you want to just file a suit, perhaps you may not like after you make an appeal, the decision of that appeal, and you want to take it further, or there are technical issues around your award that you want to file a lawsuit for. That's an individual case. I'm sure the people who are asking the question is more about the ones that Mikka responded to, which is pretty much like a national lawsuit, but with individual applicants who are experiencing damage. They didn't get their money, things like that. We definitely need that kind of standing. And it has to be analyzed. We definitely need more information. I will say that the way it was done at the NEA, one had less damage, but it was also done in a bit of a smarter way for sure, because they learned from the mistakes that happened at NEH, Voice of America, and IMLS, and quite frankly, other federal agencies. There's more specificity, for instance, of why the grants weren't approved or why they were cut off. The fact that they weren't cut off immediately and you're given another month to be able to still submit receipts and incur new costs to be able to pay off. There are a lot of similarities, as Mikka said, but there are also a lot of differences of what's going on here. But I just want to say the thing that I think is the biggest glaring issue is the ones that had their offers rescinded or withdrawn. Because if you look at the NEA website, they are called awards all over the place, including their press releases. And I think that there's something misleading about that.
Nina or whoever, question about, maybe someone's already submitted an appeal, but they just learned a lot of great information on this webinar. Can they appeal their appeal or amend their appeal, or how is that possible, to add more information?
Mikka.
Well, again, it doesn't say you can't. you might frame it as an amendment or like an addendum to your appeal dated whatever date. And why not?
I agree.
Right? Why not?
Totally.
About the appeal. So this question is going to be for my three panelists, and I think this will probably be our last question because we're already over time. But to Laura, Ed, and Manny, they write, a person writes, again, we're trying to figure out how we fit into these new priorities. This is problematic. This is a huge threat to our freedom of speech and creative expression. Why aren't we talking about how acquiescing to this is a very slippery slope? Anything that you would like to mention about that? I know this is a little more philosophical.
I will say, even if you are, I think I would characterize, if you think you have a reasonable argument that you can get into one of the new categories, I would frame that as, you are engaging in this process in good faith. You're going to take the administration at their word and you are going to, do your best to make the case. But you will also, you can also be objecting at the same time, on grounds of procedural grounds. Which gets at the whole potential invalidity of these actions. You can do both. It's not an either or.
Perfect.
Can I
Are
ask
we
Mika a
acquiescing? Go
question
ahead.
before the other? Mika, is it required for someone from the NEA who sent this to identify who is making this decision? Because at the moment, it's just says it's from the NEA without a person or a signature.
I don't know the answer to that. That there may be some provision in the APA, or there may be some other procedural requirements that are being met, but the name, the signature formalities alone, I'm not familiar with, so I couldn't say.
Thank you.
So Ed, Laura, or Manny, are we acquiescing to powers that be?
I would say we're not. I mean, I think at this moment in time, we have to use every avenue at our disposal to try and overcome this. And that can be appeals, that can be protests, that can be involving your members of Congress, that can be, larger national organizations filing or taking part in lawsuits. We need to do everything. And I don't expect to get my grant with this $20,000, but I want to appeal on principle. And I think we will quote both how we could fit into bicentennial, whatever,
250.
Yes. But also procedural grounds. Also, this was promised. Also. But I think we need to use every avenue that is available to us.
I agree with that point of view. Also, kind of philosophically, in a very high level, it has been very disappointing how the administration has been trying to reframe a conversation about arts and culture, right? So for us to be able to start speaking about what arts and culture is, the value of it, we have to start this conversation for our ability to rise above the way it's been framed so that we can be talking again about what matters, why it matters, the richness it brings to communities. So I think this isn't acquiescing, this is conversation. We have more insight in this area, and for us to persevere, we have to get this conversation about the value of arts and culture back on track for our nation.
I guess I
Laura.
would just echo a lot of that and say that I think this is a moment that if you haven't, as an organization, had a conversation with your staff, with your board, with your community about what your values are in this moment and where your line is, then you should do that before you do anything else. So I don't think there's one answer for every organization, but I do think you wrote those values down for a reason, and this is a moment to find out what they actually mean. And that will challenge our commitment to those values. So I think making sure that you are in that deep conversation about what are the decisions you're willing to make and what are the values you're going to go to the mat for, with your board, with your community, is kind of the first foundational thing that we all need to do right now.
Great. Thank you, all of our speakers, Mikka, Laura, Manny, Ed, Nina, Tushar. Also, thanks to Olivia Tarpley, who's our public policy manager, and Morgan Fernari of the Arts Action Fund, who are behind the scenes of our staff helping make this possible. Thank you, everyone who stuck around for this long 90-minute plus webinar. I hope everyone got something out of this. We have a lot of questions that were unanswered. I'm sorry. They were coming in like 4 a minute, was what I just did a little calculation. We're going to record all of them. We will make sure that we try to get good answers to categories of them. Please feel free. Please come back to our next office hours, which happen every other Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. The next one is going to be on May 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Please feel free to register for that. We will continue this conversation. We will continue with our updates. Check back to our website and to get the best the information there. But as well, many of our speakers have said, we're in this together. We need to stick together. Make sure that we do that. Make sure we comfort each other, give each other grace, give each other space, but that we continue to fight together. So thank you, everyone who's been here. We appreciate you, and I wish you a good afternoon. Goodbye.